Howdy folks, Rudrose here, and it is once again time for Set Championships. Man, where does the time go? We're at the end of the year of 2025, so today I'm going to be giving you my recommendations for decks I would take to Set Championships. If you've never seen this format before, I will give you reasons why I think you should take it, and reasons why I think you shouldn't take it. Now, in the past, I've been joined by my very good friend Justin Ward, who made Day 2 at Milwaukee. He was also a top 16 finalist at DLC Vegas. Unfortunately, just due to the holidays, we didn't have time to sync up. These set championships definitely snuck up on me. So, unfortunately, he cannot join me today, but he has recommended the decks you will be seeing here. He's given me the list of the ones I'm going to recommend. So, yeah, if it's not on this list, always judge based on your local area. You're not going to some DLC where you're going to see folks from all over. If you know your locals specifically play a certain type of deck, yeah, hey, play the counter if you want a good chance to work on that. So, as a reminder, too, for the format of these videos, the decks you're seeing on screen, I'm just using these as an example. So this deck is just an example of Blurple. The other deck just an example of Purple Steel. It's in no way saying, hey, you should run these exact cards that you're seeing on stream. Again, tech it towards what you think you're going to see at your set championships. This is just to give you an idea. So do not take these as I should one for one take this exact deck build, because I don't even agree with some of the cards on some of these. But starting with Amethyst Steel, this has been kind of the most represented deck in the meta, and it's easy to see why. I think absolutely out of every deck I'm going to show you, it is by far the most consistent, and consistency is key. This particular version running the Great Illuminary, that's kind of funny, but it just has a lot of good power spike cards like Elsa, Genie, Dumbo still very reliable, New Demona and Hades slot into this really well. Thunderbolt gives it another piece of removal that it was definitely lacking in last set and Fabled. It's just incredibly consistent, and it has a pretty wide variety of builds. You can go in on Diablo, Palace Guard. Some people really like this Olaf. You can run Doc. You can not run Doc. You can run Challenger Iago. You can go in on Calhoun. You can do more of the evasive cards like Tinkerbell or the Timothy Mouse, and he gets extra lore when you have an evasive. So that's probably one of the biggest strengths of this deck is the variety in which how you choose to build it. But it has really strong core cards like Giant Cobra, that's instant lore, plenty of card draw between Dumbo, Genie, Demona, Hades, great lore power boosters in Ursula, Cheshire Cat's new booster. So yeah, this deck is so consistent and so strong. It doesn't really have a terrible matchup into anything. I do think it is weaker against blue-green this set than it was last set. Blue-green's quite a bit more consistent. They can get their uninkable count way down now, and they can hit your whole board with the Malicious Mean Scary Prince Philip combo. So it's not quite as strong against that matchup as it used to be. And it's still, Blurple, the higher index can still kind of beat it up, but it's just consistent. It has a consistent curve out. It has consistent cards. It's very strong. The only reason you wouldn't want to take it is if you know your locals is going to be dominated by decks with really high-end cards, maybe like Sapphire Steel or Emerald Sapphire, maybe even Blurple. Again, and I think Amethyst Steel, it can beat these decks, but there definitely comes a point you just don't have the top end to deal with their top end cards. Your only pure spot removal card is Hades that they have to agree to, whereas these cards have Hades and Vincenzo, or if you're playing, this version, Basil, John Silver, they have ways to just knock something off the board if they really absolutely need to. So unless you think your area is just going to be flooded with some of those really high-end control-y type decks, I don't think you can go wrong with Amethyst Steel. Following that up with Blurple. What's a good reason to take Blurple? Well, Blurple is still very, very strong since last set. It definitely feels a bit weaker, and I don't think that the deck lost anything, but I think it's just the other purple decks got tools to help them catch up. A card like Hades and Demona, they're good here because they're good everywhere, but I think they have helped the other decks more than they helped Blurple. But we have been able to cut some things out. We're not running second star to the right anymore. Most lists aren't. I think most lists have given up on Monstro as well. Some lists go in on Tamatoa and the Junior Woodchuck Guidebook Recursion. I'm still a big fan of the Grimorum version because I assume as the Blurple player, you're most likely going to be chasing your opponent no matter what. So I kind of like the Grimorum to help you catch up on lore, but it's of course slower into those aggressive matchups. So yeah, Blurple is another, pretty much all the purple decks are very consistent. Blurple is another one. It's not quite as consistent as Amethyst Steel because you really do need to hit that ramp. You're trying to hit your Sail and your Tipo. So of course, as with any of these Sapphire decks, if you miss that ramp, the deck feels very, very slow. Another thing with this deck too is without things like the Basil into Elsa's Spike, it can feel like it lacks challenging power at times, and then you become kind of reliant on Iago, or maybe even Demona or Cheshire Cat moves to boost around. So the only thing I don't really like about Blurple is like you will be behind most of the time, so you have to be comfortable with that playstyle. And if your area is saturated with a lot of low to the ground aggressive stuff, I think Blurple can really struggle. I've seen it struggle at my locals into red purple, that really low to the ground aggressive builds. They just go so quick, and so many of their characters have 2 lore. It's just so hard to catch up to them, and even by the time you stabilize, it's hard for you to catch up on lore. So kind of run Blurple at your own risk, feel out your own environment. If you think there's going to be a lot of purple steel there, I think Blurple's still a very strong choice into that, but it can still struggle into dogs, especially if people are running the Chromicon version. It pretty much has all the same weaknesses it has from last set. If you think there's a lot of low to the ground aggressive stuff, I think Blurple is going to struggle into that. Next, what is arguably the strongest deck in the format, Sapphire Emerald, and I say that if you are looking at it from its most powerful play lines, correct? I think Amethyst Steel is the most consistent. So in a real game, when you can't pick which cards you want to draw and you have to just naturally draw, I think Amethyst Steel is going to be a lot more consistent than this deck, because this deck can absolutely brick, and I guess I'm going to start with reasons why you shouldn't take it. This deck can feel very bricky, especially if you are running more of these uninkables like Under the Sea, Spooky Sight, Bend to My Will, cards that can be insanely impactful in the right situation, but in other situations can really fall apart. There are times, too, that I do think this deck really struggles with card draw. If you don't see the Clarabelle or even the Donald Duck, and you're just kind of drawing all this other stuff, which is, I've played with this deck a lot, it happens, you can run out of gas. You can absolutely run out of gas. So this deck can very much brick on you, just like it could last set. It pretty much had that same issue, and it still has that same issue here. So it can brick on you. That's the reason you wouldn't want to take it, is that it just can be very inconsistent. However, on the flip side, I do think this is pretty much the strongest deck in the game if everything goes the way you want it to. It has some insane power plays. Prince Philip being a ward target, there's just almost nothing in the game that deals with him. The only thing I've consistently seen get rid of him is someone dropping a Demona to cause him to exert, and then they can run it and challenge him. If they're running Ruby Amethyst, if they're running a version that runs Bee King Undisputed, maybe like a Singer version, but that's pretty rare. Most folks are not doing that. So Philip, he just gets to sit there, and you can shift in with the Prince Philip, and as long as you have 6 ink, he can sing Malicious Mean Scary. You shift in on the Philip. Yeah, you don't get to take advantage of the questing that turn, but who cares? You've one-sided wiped their board, and you have this big 6/6 evasive 3-lore quester left behind. Cinderella has helped the consistency of the deck so much. Not only does she help you continue to ramp, when you get those kind of bad draws, she helps filter those out by filtering them into your inkwell and digging towards your big power plays. I'm not personally a fan of Spooky Sight. I think the Prince Philip combo alone is enough, although sometimes I do wish I had like a backup plan, but just Spooky Sight is so inconsistent. And then there's always the power Clarabelle play, right? Let's say you go first. You go first, and you get to play Clarabelle on turn 4 because you ramped on turn 2. You shift her and have her sing You're Welcome. You take the worst thing off your opponent's board, and then you refill your hand by probably 4, 5, 6 cards. I kid you not. I have never seen someone do that successfully and lose the game. It has not happened, because it's just such a blowout. It puts you so far ahead. And the moment she draws all those cards, usually she draws you into a Sail or a Tipo or some other way to just keep filtering cards out of your hands. And then she refills your hands again. And then Basil is just a beast once he gets going. Hades is, of course, a great spot removal. John Silver, some people have kind of soured on this card a little bit, but still in the right matchup, he just shuts down cards. He really, really does. So this deck, by far, by a mile, has the strongest top end and just the biggest blowout turns when it goes there. But it can have a consistency issue. So kind of take that at your own risk. I would say the thing is, it can kind of counter aggro too, right? Like even if they go aggressive, if you can get to the Philip combo quick enough, you can still blow out an aggressive deck. Some decks to watch out for is I do feel like it kind of struggles into green purple at times. The Webby really punishes our ramp as they get to ramp as well. They also have cards like Ursula that can snipe the Malicious Mean and Scary out of your hand before you can pull off the combo. So I would say that deck gives its gives it probably its most trouble. And then the other thing too is mirrors. If you don't like mirrors, and this kind of goes into purple steel too, be prepared for a lot of mirrors if you're doing purple steel, because that deck's gonna be represented. And this mirror is very unpleasant to play in, and just very kind of lopsided and weird because of the way Clarabelle works. Where like that's maybe where you want Bend to My Will, but then if they drop Clarabelle and you have a bunch of cards, they just fill back up anyway. So yeah, super powerful deck, but you got to really know the lines of it, and you have to be willing to kind of ride with a little bit of that inconsistency. Next, if you like an aggressive curve out deck, I feel like it's probably wrong to call this aggro, but it's just maybe aggressive mid-range. New Ruby Amethyst is the place for you. I'll be honest, as a previous Ruby Amethyst enjoyer, I don't like this deck at all. I think it's very boring. Granted, there's a lot of decks I find boring right now anyway, but this is nothing like old Fox and Goat shenanigans with Mauis and libraries and castles, so it's not that kind of deck. But if you like a deck that, again, kind of has this aggressive mid-range tempo lore style, this is for you. It runs a lot of 1-drops. It has really good turn 2 plays with the Diablo, the Lumiere, the Timothy Mouse. Lumiere is actually really strong in a format that has so much less removal. You know, in an Arrow with Steel song, this card would never stick around because they just sing a song for free and bop it. But because removal is so much more limited now, they don't really want to have to spend removal on Lumiere, so he can kind of just sit there as a totem, permanently buffing all your characters. They get all the nice new purple stuff like Hades, Demona, Cheshire Cat moving, a lot of 2-lore questers, Peter Pan, Sisu, the Tinkerbell. Hercules can be an absolute beast in the right situation. Sometimes he falls kind of short, and Headless Horseman is just great. It's brawl on a body, leaves 2-lore behind, and that power bump he gives is not to be underestimated. That can really swing a game. So yeah, this is a really nice curve-out deck. I think it's really strong into the right matchups. I think he has a pretty decent matchup in Amethyst Steel. It's kind of just comes down to who draws what, right? I would say the only thing with this deck, what it probably falters to a bit, is some of the higher end decks, particularly green-blue, I would imagine beats up on it quite a bit because it has a big wide board wipe. Whereas like Blurple has to still individually deal with all your characters. So in my testing, I found Blurple struggled into this. Although I've heard some people say they've had really good success into this with Blurple. So maybe that just depends on the tech cards and how it's built. Similar to Amethyst Steel, this is pretty consistent. It's a pretty consistent list. You're just looking to curve out. It runs enough of the low numbers that you're trying to curve out. Probably, again, the big reason you wouldn't want to run it is I would imagine it will struggle into more of these top-end decks that can get there quickly, and then they just kind of start dropping bombs on you. But otherwise, this deck is very solid, very consistent, and you can mix up how you build it a bit. You know, you don't have to go into library, and they never come back. Kind of choose your flavor of purple card. The only crummy part is the red cards are kind of lacking. Like Sisu, Diablo are good, but they're kind of just there for the bodies and the lore. Horseman and Hercules are the only real, like, hey, this is a red card that kind of like changes the field a bit, and similar to Lumiere, but still solid, pretty consistent deck. Will struggle probably against the top end stuff, but still good deck. Now, if you don't like consistency and you just want to go to the moon and back, play Amber Emerald Dogs. This deck can be built in many different ways. I refer to this as the Circle of Life version. There's versions that run the Gazelle Singer to recycle Circle of Life. Some of them run Clarabelle, Prince Philip, and the Mad Malicious Mean Scary combo, so they have their own form of a board wipe instead of relying on Under the Sea. So there are a few different ways you can build this deck. This one isn't running Chromicon. It still has the power it had last set. So like if you're running the Chromicon version, it's really going to beat up on Blurple. It gives that deck a lot of issues. And when this deck goes off, holy moly, does it go off. Yeah, if it does what it wants to do, it seems absolutely unfair, and it probably is very unfair. The power spikes it can get when you get down in early tramp. So like, let's say you get 3 bodies out by turn 2, you go 1-drop and then 2 more 1-drops. And so this tramp already costs 4, but especially if you're running something like Pluto or Huey to do a cost reduction, this version isn't. I've seen versions that have. You can just get him out so early, and then he's ready to sing Circle of Life, Malicious Mean Scary, Under the Sea, pick your flavor, and it's just so fast and it hits your opponents in the mouth so hard. There's nothing much they can do about it. Mowgli and Ursula are good ways to scout for cards like Malicious Mean Scary, like Under the Sea. If your opponent has any of those big actions that are going to wipe your board, you just say no to it. It's brutal. When this deck goes off, it genuinely seems unfair. However, there are also times it just falters, or it can't find the songs, or it is very reliant on this tramp card. So if it can't filter enough with Bobby or find the tramp, it has a bunch of bodies that don't really do much. And as you see, it doesn't have a lot of challenging power. This particular version has a few cards like Stitch, Lady, Raja, and there's always the little tramp bump. But in general, it's going to struggle to deal with, very large bodies on the other side. In particular, Steel is kind of made to eat it up, especially if you have a version with Calhoun. Then you're kind of forced into these board states where you can't just go questing. You have to be very patient, because otherwise all these Steel characters will eat it alive. And it tends to be very reliant on its singing. So if they are able to cut off your tramp singer or your shifted later, or whatever they can do, then suddenly it just feels like the deck stops doing anything. So yeah, if you're feeling good, you want to take a big swing. Again, maybe there's going to be a lot of Blurple. I think this deck is always a very, very solid choice. It is going to struggle more to Steel though. So if you see a lot of the Steel decks, then maybe you want to steer clear. Not impossible, of course, again, the right matchup and how you build it, but this deck is definitely going to give it some trouble. Last and certainly not least, we have the Sapphire Steel deck. I've tried this deck. This is not for me. This style just does not work for me. We see this version's running things like Spooky Sight, Ink Runner, Beyond the Horizon. Somewhat similar to Amethyst Steel. One of the nice things is there is some variety to this, is like what you kind of want your lower to the ground tech cards. Again, do you want to run Beyond the Horizon to mess with their hand? Spooky Sight can help against aggressive boards. The top end is very similar. Pretty much all of them are running Tinkerbell, Goliath, Hades, Vincenzo, Horseman. This particular version is running a one of Arthur, and also has Pluto, which is kind of interesting. Can help if you're running against the Amethyst Emerald, the Chromacon, and Ink Runner deck, as this can break items, which is very nice. And this is another list that when it goes off, it honestly seems quite strong, and I think it's in a pretty good position to prey on a deck like Dogs, like Ruby Amethyst. The bodies on some of these characters are huge. They're going to need a Horseman to banish the Vincenzo. So if they have to use damage-based removal to get through some of these bodies, they're going to really struggle, because they're here. While it doesn't have anything to the level of a board wipe that Emerald Sapphire does, Tinkerbell still provides something to that flavor, extra damage with Vincenzo. So this one's pretty consistent too. This one feels a little more consistent and reliable than Emerald Sapphire. However, the one thing holding it back is a lot of that consistency depends on Goliath. If you notice, there's not really any straight card draw in here. There's a lot of filtering effects, right? Cinderella, Mulan, Namari, Horseman, and he's just so wild. These are all kind of filtering effects. Your only straight draw effects are Develop, Sail, Vision, Ink Runner, if you're running that version, kind of Beyond the Horizon. Maybe that's why this person put it in. But it does feel overly reliant on Goliath at times. And it's a pretty effective play style if you can get there. You drop the Goliath, and now you're just emptying your hand out every turn. You're punishing any purple deck that's holding on to cards. You're punishing any of these decks that are holding on to cards if the Goliath can stick around. But having tested it, there are times you can't find that Goliath, and it's really easy to get stuck in top deck mode with this deck. That's the one thing I don't like it. Also, Horseman just as a card is not my style, because it's so swingy and random. I've seen it do 10 damage, which is incredible, and also mess up what the opponent was going to do on the next turn. And you're just like, wow, this card's busted. And then I've seen them pay 8 to do nothing, and they threw out their own good cards that they really needed on the next turn, and then it just completely hosed the person who did it. So yeah, Horseman just kind of all over the place. This deck probably utilizes Cinderella the best, because there's multiple princesses, and Kita, Namari, I don't think Tinkerbell's a princess, no, but yeah, so you have more, Mulan is as well, so even just one drop Mulan can trigger the Cinderella a lot, which is really nice. So good strong deck. Again, I think it's pretty solid into Dogs as well as Ruby Amethyst. Probably pretty okay into Amethyst Steel. Maybe this one feels somewhat even. I think it just depends. Once you get to, if you can get the bodies big enough established, this deck's going to struggle, because it just doesn't really have a way to deal with them. But if they get super far ahead and they've got instant lore, you might struggle. I do think Blurple and Emerald Sapphire probably do what you do a little bit better. Their top end is just, I think, a little stronger, but still, it's a fun list if you enjoy that style, and yeah, can be very effective in the right room. So those are my recommendations for decks. Anything else is on here. Again, go what's in your gut and what you know works well in your locals. If you think the Species list, that's like the $12 Emerald Amethyst aggro that uses Chromakai, if you find that to be very effective in your area, yeah, absolutely run that. This is just kind of a generalization. I apologize, it's not the normal super in-depth explanation with Justin, but again, with the holidays, it was just hard to line all that up. So good luck at your SEP championships if you get to play. I'm honestly not sure if I'll even get to go to any. I've got a pretty busy January coming up, but let me know how you do in the comments below. Let me know what decks you end up taking. I appreciate you so much for watching, and until next time, take care.